allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Should have had the mics off for that.
Yeah. Yep. Lots of reverb.
All right, so we have one item today, progress report on the goals. Welcome, good to see you. It's been a while. And I guess, where do we want to start off with this? You just want to jump in or run through some intro, or everybody had a chance to read the goals beforehand, I hope?
Yep.
All right, so I guess whenever you're ready, take it away.
All right. Well, it is great to see all of you, and thank you for your flexibility and willingness to have me be doing this meeting remotely. I guess during COVID, we all learned how to adjust when emergencies come up. I will tell you, my husband is doing better, but still has a long journey ahead. And so I just really appreciate being able to be with him and really appreciate my team. Thank you, Brian, for stepping in to be acting superintendent. And I know Tanya's supporting him as well as everybody else is. So thank you to Cabinet, to the board, to everybody. This report we were supposed to have earlier, but we had another emergency that happened earlier that waylaid this, and that would be our windstorm and ice storm. And so here we are today. My goal is to share with you from my view, although it's not just mine, because our cabinet also gave their input on these goals. These goals are the district goals as well as my goals. And as the executive leader for the district, my job is to make sure that everything connects and everything works for a full working system for our students. And we have operational people that are keeping all of those things working. And my job is, there are some things I do the operations part too, and I'll talk about that. But in addition to that, my job is to make sure all of this fits together. And the only way we can do that is through a culture of collaboration and shared leadership. So what I want to share first is what I'm so proud of in our goal one. Goal one is to provide a culture of care and belonging by providing students and staff time, supports, and connection. And overall, one of the things we've learned is that there are certain conditions for learning and thriving. And we have made huge culture shifts in the areas of belonging, agency, and status. And so I want to just highlight a few of those. Under a system of belonging, we learned that some of our underserved students needed some special supports, and we went about providing those supports. We had heard from educational assistants that while we often put them in teaching positions, we don't always include them in professional development, training, and our team meetings, which is something we've really worked to improve. So in this area of belonging, what I was looking at are where are those areas that we heard we weren't really including maybe students and staff, and where we see that we have shifted that culture. The other area was new teachers, and now we have a whole strategy for new teachers. In terms of agency, I see that as authentic engagement. For a long time in education, we've talked about the importance of students being engaged, but we weren't really sure what that was concretely. And what we've learned is that when students have agency and they are engaging authentically in their own learning, that is really what we're looking for. And we have accomplished that with staff and students. Our professional learning communities have really focused us on how do we create those effective teams. We have included student voice much more than ever before, and student and staff empowerment wherever possible. The third area that you look at for shifting culture to a culture of learning and thriving is under status. And where I think we've really done a great job with that is all the leadership opportunities and structures that we have created that have resulted in a collaborative culture. We have teams at every level, and we have leadership at every level, from students to teachers to classified, school teams, district level teams, and then cross-district teams. I'm going to highlight a few things under Goal 1 that we have accomplished. And I know that you've read the document, and you've probably seen that we marked ongoing, completed, or if it's in process, and then it will be at a completion point before the end of the year. So a few themes, I think, out of Goal 1 that I want to highlight are, first of all, that we have identified an SEL, or social emotional learning, professional learning community, which is a shared leadership team that helps guide the direction the district goes. And then in each building, they have care teams where the administrative team and the SELs guide that work in their schools. One of the things we've invested in very heavily is professional development. We have really focused on making sure it's job embedded and ongoing. So we don't offer it just one time, and some people get it and the others are left out when they come again, but we continue to cycle these things through. The first one would be trauma-informed care practices. We also have had professional development on student experience interviews, suicide prevention, restorative circles, mindfulness practices, peace learning circles, and zones of regulation. Sometimes a long list like that is not a good list, because we sometimes find that we're in disconnected initiatives. But what we have found with this list of professional development is they're all different aspects, like the spokes of a wheel, around how we ensure that we have a collaborative culture that feels safe, that students feel that they belong, where they have agency and status. The other thing we focused on under Goal 1 has been development of structures and processes. I mentioned already our care teams that we have in all of our schools. We also have a suicide prevention manual and a process for that, as well as risk assessment. We have developed the structure of our welcome week for our new teachers. This is the second year that we went through that. I'm sorry, this coming summer, we're already planning for it, will be our second year that we've done that. And we got a lot of great support from both the mentors as well as our mentees. The other thing that we focus on under this is anchoring our work always in standards. So the state has now social emotional learning standards. Our PLC team has prioritized those standards and has determined which ones are essential that every student needs, and which standards are those that students might need in certain special circumstances. The other area that we've done a great job of is in wraparound services. We have, as you know, I think it's over 140 partners that we partner with, both in the community and in the region and in the state, to ensure that our families and students have all those wraparound services that we don't have the money, the time, or the expertise to offer, but we have the students and we have the families. And so what has really been key for us has been the coordination services created and developed by our community care specialists. Before I move to Goal 2, I wanted to pause and see if you had any questions.
Do we have any way to track data on the suicide prevention piece? That seems like it would be one to have good information about.
So yes, our process requires us to keep good documentation on that. Now, I'm not sure specifically what data piece you're asking a question about, but the process itself has a whole paperwork trail where we keep track of from the very beginning when a student is identified as possibly at risk, all the way through any support services that would happen for the student, as well as special plans and follow-up.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else under our first goal?
Okay. Hearing none.
Okay. I need to open my iPad here. It closed up again. All righty. So I'm going to move on to our second goal, which is to provide staff time, support, and professional development to effectively utilize professional learning communities as the key strategy for collectively raising student achievement. We landed on this strategy. Many of us have had experience with the professional learning communities even before we started our real focus here. But we also know the research shows that really the only way you get changes in student achievement is when teachers are working together in teams to see how students do with initial instruction, and then what needs to be done in terms of reteaching, which doesn't mean just doing the same thing again, but finding different ways to teach a concept. And then also identifying what other interventions and supports or extensions kids might need. And so our professional learning community strategy is the most important thing we began to establish here, because once you have it established, any change you want to do in instruction or curriculum or anything can be monitored through your PLCs. Teachers learn together. They can take off small bites and try new things, see how they're working, come back and talk about them, look at the student data, and so on. And I know we've shared with you a lot about our PLCs, especially last year, not as much this year, and I know we have some new board members. So that's an area where we'll continue to bring information back about that. There's some areas specifically under raising student achievement in addition to our major strategy of establishing effective PLCs. And that is to make sure all the curriculum and instruction and assessment work is done appropriately and of high quality. So the first thing we do is make sure that we understand what is it students need to know and what do they need to be able to do by the end of each grade level in order to smoothly transition all the way through the system to graduation. That work started with our English language arts adoption. We first prioritized the standards and then looked at effective materials. We're doing the same thing with math. And one of the things we look at, in addition to the materials, are what are the conditions for learning and thriving in each of those content areas. Then what our teams have done is started to develop common formative assessments. We have those done in some areas, but it takes a few years to get assessments done for every standard. But essentially, it's teachers working together to develop their own assessments that they give to the students after they have taught a concept or a standard to see if students acquired that standard. Did they learn the material? Do they have the knowledge and skills to move forward? That is super important work. It also it gives us data so that when we're looking at student progress, we know if we're comparing apples to apples. A lot of our assessments that are provided, like through the state or some other places, they're not always exactly tied to our standards. And so it's really hard to tell you whether students are progressing on the standards if it isn't perfectly aligned. And that's where our teachers come in developing those common formative assessments. And when they're first developing them, they pilot them and they see how they work. Do they really help us know how students did on that standard? Sometimes they have to make changes, and modifications. Sometimes they have to break them down a little bit. So it takes a lot of time to develop those and use them with students, look at the data, come back together again, and revise those common formative assessments. So that work will be underway for a long time. It's actually continual work. You're never done with it because you're always finding better ways to do that. But it is one of the key strategies that will give us the data to be able to tell you if students are progressing on what we're teaching them. We also, under this goal, have developed a strategy and a cycle for reviewing data and improving the instruction. That's through the PLC process, but also through the work that Brian has started this year with the student success team. The other thing that we focus on after you have standards, you know what your assessments are going to be, you have your high quality textbook adoptions, then that is also what other professional development do you need? Sometimes the professional development by the publishers is effective, but it's never enough. Sometimes we have to drill down into more specific skills. An example of that is around letters. Letters is a training around phonics, phonemic awareness, something that our reading coaches have really highlighted as something important for all our teachers to have. So when our instructional coaches identify an area of need, they are the ones we rely on because they're the experts to go find out where are we going to get the information, how are we going to teach the teachers. We have done that also in Amplify, which is our reading curriculum, and we'll do the same thing with math. The other thing is also, we've been doing that around the teaching of English language development through our co-teaching at Bohemia. As you know, this is our first year with that. Another area that is helping us focus on raising student achievement is having instructional coaches. We also know that when you get students early enough, you can make bigger gains. And so we have prioritized getting kids as early as possible. So we have 5 preschool promise classrooms, as well as our Peggy's Primary Connection that has preschool kids as well. We also have our nursery that we started up this year. So we try to get our kids as early as we can and work not only with the children, but also with the parents. It's just a full cycle and circle. And then we have multiple areas we've been working on for our multilingual learners. In addition to the co-teaching, we're also looking at how do we provide effective instruction for students we tend to call those newcomers. Those are students who have not been in the United States for a year yet, and so they don't have the language skills usually to thrive in a regular classroom. So we try to keep them together with their peers, learning very specific sort of survival strategies, as well as English, as well as their content learning. In the area of our students with special needs, we've been looking at post-secondary transitions, looking at augmented and alternative ways of supporting students. And an area that we often talk a lot about and hear a lot about, even in the media, is supporting our students with behavioral needs, the self-regulation skills, which also falls under our social emotional learning work. We also have many staff members trained in MANT, which some people refer to as the restraint hold training, which that is a part of it, but mostly it's about trying to understand what is going on for students. What are the antecedent behaviors? What is it I as a teacher or the student or other students in the classroom might be doing or not doing that could help the student regulate? So we'll continue working on that area. Before I move to goal 3, I'll pause and see if there's any questions on goal 2. I'm also going to invite Brian to step in. Brian is heavily involved in every single one of these goals. And so if there's an area I haven't really expressed as a highlight, Brian, please feel free to jump in. Any questions?
Seeing none, I think we can keep going.
All righty. So I'll move to goal 3, and this one actually is one that Brian is directly responsible for. And so I'll read what we have here, but Brian, if you want to elaborate on anything, please jump in. We have really looked at multiple options for credit recovery, not just at Kennedy, but also at Cottage Grove High School. We also continue to offer many dual credit opportunities at the high school that are high school credit and college credit at the same time, for those who might not know what dual credit is. One of the things I know Brian has been super excited about this year, as well as the staff, is they've been participating in learning walks together as a team, where they've been looking at every one of our programs of study. That's one of the things that sometimes people don't understand about career and technical education. It's not just having one class in the area, but do we have a series of classes that actually creates a program of study and a pathway for students to actually accomplish something that is worth something to go to the job market with. We've also been working with our community partners and preparing our students, not just in CTE, but in other courses too. How do we prepare them with those workplace and readiness skills that some people call the soft skills? But really it's, do we have them ready for jumping into a job, any job? Do you want to add anything there, Brian?
Yeah, there's actually been some movement over the past couple of weeks that Yvonne doesn't
Great.
know. Tell you what is going on there. One is a little over a week ago, I was talking to Jeff, to you about this, but we had 5 industry partners from different size businesses, from a local restaurant in town to Richardson Apparel to some folks that build rock crushers, I mean, and everything in between. So we had 5 different employers in, and our entire CTE team of teachers was there to hear how they evaluate, and they like how they interact with with employees, and what they need students to know coming in, and what prevents them from doing well, and what helps them to do well. And we know a lot of those things, but to hear it right from them was pretty powerful. And to hear them talk about like in our evaluation, this is how we do it, and this is what you could do with a project. And because that's what they were wanting, is like, how can we make our projects in all these different pathways similar to what they're doing in industry, and how can we make simulate industry in our classroom? Which leads to another conversation that we had just a few days ago, and that is we're going to start a pilot project that really mixes together probably 3 different CTE areas. So yes, there's pathways, but in the real world, there's not just one. You don't go to a job and it's just one pathway, and there's several different, like at a doctor's office, there's a business office, right? I mean, several different pathways that kind of cross in our real world. And so what we're going to do is a pilot project with a gentleman from Pivot Architecture that will help us to create that, and he'll recruit the industry partners to where we can create real world experiences within a couple of our programs, so that we're producing things at the high school that kids, what we want kids to be able to do is leave high school with a year or 2 of actual experience that they can go to any employer and say, yeah, I'm 18, but these are the 2 years of experience. This is what I've done with this, whether it's the pilot project or in a particular pathway, to give them a leg up on employment as they leave high school, if that's what they choose to do. Now, if they choose to go to a different educational option, think of the leg up they have there too. So anyway, those are 2 things that just have kind of jumped up in the past couple of weeks that are pretty cool. So
Thank you.
Question, Brian, about that. So back when I was in high school a few years ago, we had a really good forestry program that Al Kennedy ran. Do we have anything like that within the district today?
we have a natural resources AFNR, and I don't remember what that stands for, but it's a natural resources pathway over at Kennedy. And they do work with all natural resources. And so they do reparations, they do forestry work, they do all sorts of different work. I would love, I was telling Jeff this, I would love to take you all in smaller groups on a tour of what we're doing CTE wise, because I think you'd be surprised, because we do not do a fabulous job of selling what we do. But we're working on that. We're looking at doing a CTE showcase at the first concert in the park in June, to where we'll set up and really show what we're doing at both high schools. But if you would like to do, maybe not this week or next week, maybe after, in April. After spring break. Let me go rejuvenate for a couple of days. But if you want to do that, I'd be more than happy to take you on that, because I think you'd be impressed at what our kids are doing, and also could kind of get a glimpse of where we want to grow and make it better. So we got a great group of teachers that are working on that.
So a question, we get at the ESD, we get a report from Cresswell because Mike Johnson is on the board. They're starting to do a pilot program. I mean, flying
An
planes.
actual pilot.
Yeah,
A pilot.
and they're going to use our airport. Do we ever partner like a Cresswell to do that?
You could. That's not something that I'm aware of. Like, I don't know anything about that. But
Actually, at the superintendent meeting, we have talked about how we give each other access to some of the CTE programs that different districts have. It seems like sometimes our schedule and transportation for kids tends to be one of the challenges. Right now, we haven't figured out a way to do that. I haven't even brought that, as Brian says, to our district, but I did open that conversation with Mike Johnson last time I saw him. So it's something we always want to figure out.
And that would be like for the Hope Factory too?
Yes, I believe we have a student in the Hope Factory, don't we?
No.
I believe we do.
Well,
Yeah, I think
we did.
I believe we have one student doing that.
Okay.
No. We're transporting.
Good. We need more.
Well, we have more than you thought of a second ago. So
Yeah. They can carpool together, because what is it, 2 or 3 hours, and then they get back to school, or?
yeah, I believe so. I know I've talked to Kevin about that. That's why I'm really pretty sure that
That's
we have
wonderful.
one
That's
student.
great.
there.
What is
Yeah.
the Hope Factory? The one I was talking about last board meeting, where they make the trailers.
Oh, okay.
Was that just DePaul? Yeah.
Well, the airport one would be great, because I know a fourth grader at Harrison who's learning to fly a plane a little bit already, so
Oh, wow.
we could get that. We could get that together. No, not with mine. What are the 3 areas that the pilot project you were talking about combines, Brian?
It's design. And so it would be manufacturing. It would be could be into we just have a brand new arts pathway that we're starting to develop, because the teacher was just licensed.
Mhm.
We also have not this Tucker, but the other Tucker, the younger Tucker. Does work with well, I didn't say that, but print and video.
People, the camera, you guys look like.
Okay.
Media.
Okay, keep going.
We have to separate.
With print and video and with the media. And so mixing those together, and also the business. So, I mean, if you could imagine, this was one of the ideas that we talked about, and this, don't quote me as this is going to happen next week or anything, but this is the kind of stuff we're talking about. If we came up with a logo in our media class with a logo that we would use and copyright for Cottage Grove High School. Okay. Then what could you do with that? Well, then you could make t-shirts. That's in the business area. You could do some marketing and selling of those t-shirts. We could use the swag wagon and go to concerts in the park and sell those. You could also do designs in manufacturing and use our 3D printers or other things that they have to print that on things. So it wouldn't just have to be t-shirts, but it could be on metal. It could be on like they could do that same design in a different way. Just kind of, and then in art, I mean, there's a myriad of ways that you can go from there, but building real world experiences where, I mean, wouldn't it be cool if kids from all of those programs were working on the same project for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks? That's the kind of thing we're talking about. And we're starting small. I know that doesn't sound like we're starting small, but like with 3 or 4 programs just working together on something like that. We haven't determined exactly what that is yet. And then getting the industry partners in. The whole view is like a teacher teaches, right? I know that seems simple, but if you go in and watch Jaden Tucker or Ricardo Flores, they're not just teaching. They're teaching, they're troubleshooting all the business stuff that they're doing because they have student businesses. What if there was a business person in there doing that and they were just teaching? In the manufacturing area, what if there was a welder in there correcting them on weld, but the teacher was around teaching the other 28 students in the class how to do something else? That's the kind of partnership that we're talking about. And so that's what we want to develop a little bit more.
So with the health center coming in, wouldn't that dovetail into that?
It does a little bit. Like that's a different thing, but it's also like, so for our health pathway, we have a meeting this coming Monday where we're trying to work out the details of what a job shadow and an internship is at the community health center.
Okay.
So we're working on that piece of it, but as far as blending a lot of different things together, we're trying to just focus in one area and then we'll go from there, or with one project, if you will, and then we'll build from there.
Sounds promising.
So sorry, Yvonne, you didn't know about that yet, but we've been working. So we've been working hard on that. So
You never have to apologize for new opportunities for kids. All right, we'll move to goal 4. Goal 4 isn't one that has a lot of bells and whistles with it and really doesn't directly affect students, except indirectly it does when we don't have everything in place. We put this one in because we had a board member who said, compliance is important and that should be one of the goals. And then we had some conversations about, should it really be a goal? It's just part of the work. But this year, some things happened that made it kind of important that we had a goal around compliance. And that is, we had some audits that we were not expecting, not just our typical audits, like we always have them in finance and some of our title programs, but we also had an OCR audit. We had both of our high schools are in the middle of accreditation process. And then ODE selected us for an OCR audit, as well as we got 2 federal OCR, Office of Civil Rights audits. So making sure that, like, one of the key parts of my job is to make sure everything operates like a system, where you don't get one thing that can completely disrupt the entire system. In order to have that happen, when you get audited, you get information about where that's working. We do our own kind of audits and looking to see how smoothly things work. But when the state or the federal government or some other agency comes in and audits us, they're looking at it oftentimes in a different way than we do. And so I actually see those audits as being very helpful. So we have not finished up with any of them, but we're progressing on them, because when you get involved in these audits, it's sort of their opportunity to get a peek in your district, and they keep asking more questions and some more documentation. But we're moving right along. Every time we've met with the people we're doing audits with, they've said, great progress. You're going in the way that we would recommend. So we'll continue to give you updates about that. Also, you know that we've received a lot of money outside our state school funds, and that comes to us through grants. Obviously, our ESSER funds was a huge one, but we also have the SIA and the High School Success, which is all under our integrated projects now. But with every one of those grants, you have to develop a plan. You have a team that helps you do that. That's a representative team. There's budgets that go with it. And then there's reports and data that have to be submitted all the time. And all of those have to be put together in in a system, in a cycle, for us to be able to stay on top of them, because they're in addition to everything else we're doing. So that is an area that we've been focusing on, along with building our business systems to be more and more effective. So I know you know about and have heard a lot about our transition to our new software, but in our business systems and operations work, it's not just the software, but it's all the processes that we go through to make sure that we're being as effective and as efficient as we can. And so those are things we're always improving, always working on. The audits help us do that. So do the reports that we have to do. Another area that was not brand new, because this came before COVID, but they have continued to update and change what is required for Title IX. You have to have certain people who serve certain roles. There's a lot of training that has to go into place, and it has to be updated on a regular basis. And we used to think about Title IX just in terms of athletics. In fact, in many districts, the athletic director was the Title IX coordinator. Well, that has greatly shifted now. And our human resources director is also our Title IX coordinator. The other thing that was required this year by our state is that we have an Office of Civil Rights coordinator. And there's training that goes with that and learning about those systems. That we put on my plate for this year. We'll probably stay there on the superintendent's role right now, because I don't think others have bandwidth to do that. And it makes sense that the superintendent does it, because when they do the Office of Civil Rights, when there's complaints or when there's audits, it can touch every aspect of the district. So those are two new areas, because we're constantly updating what those processes look like. Any questions on goal 4, which is really about compliance, but I see it as systems development.
Would it be reasonable and appropriate for the board to also see the admin newsletter? And or helpful, the who knew one?
Actually, you're under communication, but yeah, we can talk about that. I haven't moved to the goal 5 yet.
Yeah, I did skip ahead. We can wait till we get
We
there.
write that for a particular audience, but we take out of that
Mhm.
and put to the board what you would want.
So we're getting
You're getting the
what's
information that-
relevant to us
Yeah.
out of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
we use that as a communication tool to principals, office managers, and supervisors.
Mhm.
There's some things we want them to pass along to staff. There's some things we just need to update them on that are coming and that sort of thing. So it's pretty specific to their role, but then Tanya looks at that, and then Tanya and Yvonne look at that and then make sure that that's in your, I believe.
Week of the week.
Okay, sounds good.
A lot of it ends up in not only board newsletters, but also in superintendent updates at board meetings. So a lot of times we might not tell the board about it when we're just starting something, but we tell them as we actually implement, for example. Like one example I can think about is all the details for Fall Academy. The form for teachers to register, what's available, who's teaching them, who might want to go to what. There's just a lot of details that is not information pertinent to the board, but when we actually implement the Fall Academies, we let you know what we're teaching, how they're going, what feedback we're getting from staff along the way, and so on. And that usually comes in the updates.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, well, since you moved us right along, I can move to goal 5. Goal 5, I've kind of separated it into 2 parts for myself to talk about. One is communication and the other part is engagement, because we've been working on actually both aspects of this the entire time I've been here, and trying to hone in on what are the most effective, because you can try kind of like a shotgun approach to doing multiple different kinds of communication, but if they're not coordinated, and if we aren't keeping track of what we've communicated to what stakeholder group, it gets very confusing, including to ourselves. So we're really proud of this cycle, these items that we have that go out in the cycle. And it starts with the admin newsletter. What's Right in South Lane is a little bit separate from that. Brian continually is working with superintendents on what are the great things happening that community might not know about, or the rest of the district might not know about, or the board might not know about. And he'll do articles about that. The peak in the week is aligned with my calendar and what I'm doing, because I am your one employee. I want you to know, how do I spend my week? You know, how much of my time am I in schools? How much am I in the community? How much am I in the central office, supporting all of the cabinet and the business operations that are going on? And then board newsletters and updates. I found that what I've done is kind of, when I do a newsletter, it tends to be between the board updates. I try not to repeat on those two things. So I don't do the board newsletters as often, because I also do those superintendent updates. And then Tanya does her Who Knew, and that's where she's looking at the admin newsletter. And she also might have additional things from herself or from the business office of saying, what is it we need the office managers to know? How can they support their staff and also their administrator? In the area of communications, I kind of wanted to say something about this here, just because it doesn't always show up in other areas, but we have a whole team that does interpretations and translations. We have 3 staff members through our Early Learning Center and Family Resource Center who get a lot of training. They have continued to work on different certificates themselves. We have one who is multilingual in mom, Spanish and English. The other 2 are Spanish and English, and they are busy all the time. We also have another agency we work with when they are full and can't do all of the work, like for conference time. The team is called SEMA. We call them in to do that work as well. Super important under communication to make sure that our families whose first language is in English, that they are supported and they get the information at the same time everybody else who gets it in English gets it. We've also continued to improve our emergency and inclement weather communications and kind of how those roll out. And one advancement that's really helped us, I think, a lot, move things very quickly, has been our Remind app. And you've been a part of that as well. We also have developed a decision tree. We have a cascading push out on the way we get those messages out, and it includes on our social media. So that's the area of communication on Goal 5. The next area is engagement. Again, this is where we want people authentically engaging and feeling agency, like they're a part of the work we're doing. A great place to see this year has been the student success team that Brian's put together, that has parents, board members, students. I think we all have just really loved hearing from the students. They, out of their mouths comes gold all the time. Really informs us about what life is like for them and what they really need from us. And it's also nice to always hear their reports at the end on what they've learned from the meeting that they didn't know was actually going on in support of them. And that's been kind of fun to hear through their lens as well. We put together, as you know, a semesters team. Again, work Brian was doing with teachers, knowing that we needed to move to from trimesters to semesters. We have included more student voice at our board meetings. And I have begun doing listening sessions with our BIPOC students starting at Kennedy. I had one planned at the high school, but I'll have to get to that one next when I get back. Also, the engagement with our Family Resource Center. We have just this whole cycle. One of the things we're working on right now is with newcomers that come to our high school. We're getting more and more students who come to us as unaccompanied youth, which means their parents aren't with them. And they enroll in our high school, but sometimes they have to work and they can't go to, so we're trying to problem solve with them and working through Family Resource Center, but also through some of our partners like Lane Community College and PLAS and some of those other areas where we have been offering opportunities and learning that we can offer more. And I know, Jeremy, I was just reading the notes from a meeting that happened just this last week with partners along with Sarah Canales, and it looks like they came up with some really great ideas. So we just will be moving forward on that as well. So as we engage our students, I meant to say too, that was another group that we had listened to at the high school. I think it was Jeremy and I who went to listen to our newcomer students to see what their experience is when they first get here, what is it they need, and what are the limitations they have in terms of working and living and just all kinds of system barriers they run into, because we can take those barriers away from them. So that wraps up goal 5. See if you have any questions on any of those. Sounds very quiet. So the next step of my evaluation process is for me to bring to you a self-reflection. It will repeat some of this information, but really just be kind of a real high view of the things that I am super excited about our work. What's kind of on the horizon? What are some things we're going to be looking at going forward? And a chance for us to just have more dialogue about that. So please continue to look at this progress report, write your questions on the paper if more come up, because when we meet in executive session, we can go back over those things. At that time, we'll also all get to see the results of the targeted survey. And then the board will have some time to discuss all of the documents that I've shared with you, what the work has looked like, and complete that evaluation process. We have asked Vince from OSBA, I don't know, I think we shared that with you, maybe Tanya did, that Vince is going to guide the board through that process. And I'm delighted that he's going to come so you can all meet him, because Vince is the one is our go-to person at OSBA when we have policy questions. I don't remember, Dwayne, if you got to talk to him ever. I know Taylor has talked to him, so has Colleen, maybe even Tammy and Sherry. So it'd be nice for some of our new board members now to get to know Vince, so you know the person behind the information we get from the Oregon School Board Association. So that's all I have tonight for the progress report, unless, Brian, there's anything else you want to add?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Quick question, is the youth survey coming as part of that, or is that a separate piece?
That's a separate piece, but I'll let Brian respond to that.
We talked about that last time. It's not something that we talked about having it before next week if you wanted it. What's really hard about that, but I couldn't, my goal was to try to get it done, like to have a little bit of something for you today, but it just was not right. I can work on it this week and see if David can help me to get some data. The hard thing about Youth Truth is we could spend an hour and a half on it. You don't have time to do that. So trying to narrow down exactly what data you want. What we've gone through a pretty extensive process with each building. And I'm only telling you this so you can maybe give me some direction on the kinds of things that you would want me to focus on in getting that data to you. Every administrator team from each building worked with me to really look at their data pretty deeply and come up with what's going well. And some schools had some excellent upticks. And then what's not going as well. And some schools had some things that went down and that stayed down. So they did that, and then they've all gone back to then their schools. And then they're also sending things out to parents. Hey, this is what we found out on youth group. The good, the not so good, and some comments from students. And I think most of them are using the same template that we talked about when I met with them. And so we're doing that. And what's cool about that is because that's really where the data is. Like the district data, you can see a few themes here or there, but it's really by school. And so, because that's really where they're talking about the culture is within that particular school, with the parents, with the students, and with the staff. So that's what's hard about putting something out district-wide, because it's not going to show you the trends, for example, during elementary. But there's some pretty cool stuff. And so, or at Cottage Grove High School, there's some pretty cool stuff that improved, that we would want to highlight. So that's the hard thing about trying to do that in less than like 100 slide pages, which you won't let me do. So if you want to give me a little bit of guidance on the kind of things that might be helpful for you, then maybe I can get something together for you.
Can I ask this quickly? Is this the invite that Jeremy and the principal have invited the board to celebrate the data?
I don't know. I'm not sure that that's accurate, but I'm not sure.
Yvonne, do you know the answer to that by chance?
I don't.
Okay, I'll question Jeremy. And then
Again, Brian and I had this conversation. I think we all feel like this about Youth Truth. Youth Truth data, the whole survey is designed to be school by school. It's really not designed to do like how's the whole district doing, because you want it to be data that is actionable, that the staff, students, and administrators in that school can look at that and compare how do staff, students, and families or parents feel and think about the experience of their student in that school. And it's very far from the part you're doing right now, which is a superintendent evaluation. I personally think that what would be most helpful to the board is to learn, what did our administrators learn and what do our teachers learn and what are some of the things they're doing about the data that they have, because otherwise it's just data. If you don't know how each building is using that data to make adjustments in what they do, because yes, we have district strategies, but we are very intentional about what we call a tight, loose model. That is, we identify the major initiatives and strategies from the district level, and we make sure that we're supporting it with our resources. But in school, they have some where we let loose to let the schools and the administrators decide what is important to our students in our school and our families and so on. And so there are different ways they can go with that data. They might say, we're going to look mostly at what the students are saying. Or we might say, where's there a difference between what students and teachers and parents are saying? And then the question is, I wonder why that's different. Then you have to go get some more information. Otherwise, it's just data and you don't really know the answer to the question. Sometimes it might be that one of the stakeholder groups, you didn't have very many people answer the question. Sometimes it is just based on their role and how they're looking at what they want for their student, whether they're a teacher or a parent. So it's very complicated data to look at. It is better to do what Brian's saying, and that is, what is the question you want answered? Then go look at the data and see if you can answer the question. Or ask the administrators, what questions are you asking yourself when you look at this data and your staff? And what do you think is most important to do something about?
Well, I think I would like to hear that from administrators from each building. What do they think is important and what are they doing about it? I think I'd also like to see what the parents were sent out about their particular school. Because if I feel weird as a school board member not knowing that information about each school when parents are.
personally, like Brian, you said you see some things that were low that stayed low. And that were high that stayed high, and we have to hold. If you're gonna separate them into the schools, we still have to hold those administrators at those schools accountable through the superintendent. And so if something is low and staying low, I think that's something we want to see as a board. And if something's high and staying high, we'd like to see that too. I mean, both of those. We should be basing our decision on those things. And then you've got a lot of the neutral stuff or new things. So I think if we could see the new things and then the old things, I guess, the things that stayed low or the things that stayed high would be helpful. Some things that might have came out pop to you.
Yeah, it'd be hard to point all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, just because there's like tens of questions and there's 5 different areas and I'm just
3 different stakeholder groups
with 3 different
and 7 different schools. Yeah.
Is there data that's already been kind of put together that we could have instead of having to go through something and make a brand new report? So it wouldn't be quite as daunting.
Yeah, I mean, like Yvonne, should chime in on this. I can say what I can do, but y'all need, like, I don't want to make the decision, but one thing I did have the Youth Truth, the person from Youth Truth, their data analyst looked at our data and recognized patterns, things that went up, things that went down, and there might be some of that I could share.
Yeah,
It's not by school necessarily, but it's each of the levels. So like some elementary data from the student, staff, and parents survey, middle school data from the student, staff, and parent survey, and then the same thing from the high school level. What you're not going to see in that is, for example, there might be some very different responses at Cottage Grove High School than there are at the Kennedy, but I don't think in the amount of time that you can give to look at that, you're going to be able to get that level of detail. But if I gave you some of those things, is that kind of getting you what you would want to see? Like for example,
I think so.
So Yvonne, do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
How does that sound to you?
Yeah, I think that sounds great. I'm trying to remember last year what we shared, and I think it might have been that report. Maybe you could check back with David.
I will. I mean, like for example, like I'll just give you a couple of tidbits. Adjournment School 3 to 5th graders tended to rate higher than other schools. Boys and girls are rating similarly. Hispanic Latino students are rating noticeably higher than their peers in several themes: academic challenge, instructional methods, and belonging. I mean, it just gives you some data points, and then there's some decreases as well, but those happen to be some positive ones. A slight downward trend in all themes, a bit more notable downward trend in instructional methods. I mean, so that kind of stuff. So if I share just some of the biggest things that jump out from the data analysis that you did, that might be helpful for you.
I agree.
Just give you kind of a flavor, but it wouldn't give you the whole flavor, right? It just would give you a little bit.
Can't get too much.
You can get lost in the YouTube information because there's so much you can do.
That's my concern, is that if it's out of context, then people can get conclusions that are not accurate.
That's why I like having somebody else look at our
Yeah.
data and give us some information. So that was really nice. But I can put that together this week.
Okay.
Because you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Just cut down on one of my breaks.
Right.
You don't need
I
lunch.
mean, personally, I'm kind of a data guy. I feel like, the broader view you have, the better picture you get. So I wouldn't be afraid to see the whole thing, I suppose, with the permission to board members to not go through every detail if it's too much. But personally, I wouldn't mind
Maybe
at
this
least
is,
having a chance to look over it. I'm, perfectly happy to take it with the grain of salt that it will be helpful to have some crunch numbers and some interpretation from the Youth Truth data person or you or David or whoever.
could this be something that, like, if you're interested in it, maybe you could look at it with David on your own time
I would be okay with
You
that.
know what I mean? Because maybe we don't need to base the superintendent evaluation on the minutia.
And I realize we've gotten sort of out of the superintendent evaluation part of it, but it was mentioned. and
Like
so
you,
was
I think it's
curious.
fascinating too, because I'm all about data and course corrections and all that,
Mhm.
but. And talking to David's always a treat, but
Mhm.
I don't know that. I don't know that Yvonne's evaluation needs to be dependent on this.
No, and I'm
Yeah.
not suggesting that it does. I'm just,
Yeah,
at whatever point we get into the youth truth piece, I
Yeah.
personally would prefer to take the bigger bite.
yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
So, Chairman, I did check in because Jeremy Smith is the one I got the dates for
Mhm.
you guys for the invites. And he did state that you approved the iReady math benchmarks, civils, etc. was part of the invite for the celebrations. So for the London celebration and Greenwich celebration and things that work to celebrate the data.
Oh, okay. I guess I didn't pick up on the connection between those two things. Yeah. I'll have to go back and see when those are or.
I believe it's
London's tomorrow.
One is tomorrow at 2:45 and then 14th, I believe.
Or can they not?
Is it? Is the meeting I'm not quite sure what the celebrations are, but it's in your. piece of the week.
I'd still stand with, I'd like to just see things that were bad, that stayed bad and think that we good, that maybe that reflects on superintendent, that reflects on us. That's really all I'd like to really see is things that pop out at you, Brian.
Yeah, I can, but I want to be careful that it's not just things that pop out at me. That's why I'd like to really rely on somebody who really looked at our data that doesn't know. You know what I mean? Because I wouldn't, well, later on, I don't want it to be said, well, Brian didn't tell us this. Well, I think I want to, and fair enough. I mean, I am biased, right? I'll own it. And so I'll just take a synopsis of what he talked about and try to put it in a way that's easily digestible.
That's a really objective way to do it. I think that's really fair.
Yeah.
I think between all of us, we can course correct too at the next meeting if we're taking it a little too far. If it's something that, Tammy doesn't believe pertains to it, you correct us and let's keep an open mind and run with that. I'm willing to do that.
Okay, so where are we now? We seem to have finished. Is there anything else we need to take care of this evening? All right, so next week is the executive session and Vince leading through on your self-reflection, right?
Yes, at this time it is. I may have to make an adjustment in the time or be online again. I don't know some dates about my husband's treatment yet,
Mhm.
but
Okay.
I'll get that to you as soon as I do.
Okay, well, I think we just, as a board, need to be prepared to be flexible on that.
Yeah.
But
Thank you.
current plan is next Monday with Vince and hopefully you here or online, one of the two.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again. Thanks, Brian and Tanya and the whole team that's there. And this is when you know that your teamwork works.
Okay, well, thanks everyone, and you take care of you and family and
Thank
just
you.
be in touch when you can, okay?
Good
Okay.
luck.
Thanks,
right.
Yvonne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we are adjourned.